to the PG&E Multifamily Upgrade Program Quarter 3 Partner Meeting. I'm glad that you can join us. This is Matt Jones speaking here. I'm the technical manager of the program, and let's do a little bit of housekeeping. So first, all of you are joining through GoToWebinar, and you have a couple options to listen in and comment. So one, you can dial in on the telephone and you'll enter an access code and an audio PIN. The PIN is important because it allows us to unmute you for questions later. But also there's a handy question box that you'll see on the panel, and you can type any questions that you want, and we will address them as we go through this webinar. And with that, let's get underway. So today we're going to talk about a few things. The big one is we will talk about our deadlines for the 2017 program year. Kind of following that, we'll talk about closing out projects and the verification review process and how you can go through that quickly and get paid quickly. We'll also talk about combustion safety and the tests that you'll be doing at Test Out for 2017. And finally, we'll have some updates about the 2018 program. So let's jump right in. We have a few projects that we are waiting on test-in documents. Our test-in submittal deadline this year is Friday, September 29th. And so that deadline is for the complete test-out package. And that includes the assessment report, the combustion appliance safety testing, test-in documents and backup files, all of your energy models and Econ 2s, existing conditions photos, your field notes and takeoffs, things like that, and your construction schedule. Those are the things that are due on the 29th for your projects. And if you're having a hard time, if you don't think you'll be able to meet that date, talk to your plan reviewer right after this call and check in. We definitely want to work with you on these projects, but we need to know if you're going to have trouble. And next is the verification deadline. So this is the big one, folks. And missing deadlines risk the loss of incentives. We're a first come, first served program, and the deadlines are really important this year. So the first thing to do is when we reserve incentives for your project, we set the completion date based on the construction schedule. And that, so you have a deadline right in the incentive reservation letter. So after this call, open up your projects, check that incentive reservation letter, and figure out what the deadline for submittal for that project is. And we have a really hard deadline, so that's the first thing to do. Make sure you hit that deadline. If you're going to have problems with that deadline, check in with your reviewer. The hard and fast deadline for this year is Monday, November 19th, 2017. And that's when we need all the verification packages for any projects that you're working on to be submitted to us. And what does that mean? That means construction's done, you've gone out and done your rater verification, and you've sent us these items. The verification letter is the first thing. If you don't have the template for this, check with your plan reviewer and they'll send you a version of it. It's really straightforward and pretty easy to fill out. But you also submit updated models and Econ 2s that are based on your findings at the site, photos of the new equipment and conditions on site, cut sheets for any equipment, signed permits, invoices, lighting schedules, combustion appliance safety testing results, and finally W-9s. which helps everyone get paid. And so what happens if you miss a deadline? Well, if you miss a deadline this year, then there's a good chance you'll miss out on incentives. So the deadlines are very strict this year, and I just can't communicate that enough. If you miss a deadline, the project is going to move to the end of the 2018 program waitlist. And the waitlist is our list of projects that we know about that are slated to complete in 2018. And that list is really big right now, and it exceeds what our likely incentive budget is going to be. So if you end up missing a deadline and you have to go to the back of that wait list, it's going to be really hard for that project to get incentives. And what I want everyone to know is if you think you're in this situation where you might miss a deadline, or it's really tight, or you know you're going to miss a deadline, let us know right away. So communication early and often really helps us with projections and figuring out what the options are for your project. So, if you think you're going to miss the deadline, call us. And Mike, do we have any questions up to this point?
We have two questions that have come in. So one is just a clarification on the date. So I think we might have said the 19th somewhere in the discussion there. So just to reiterate, it's Monday the 13th, right? Is the closeout deadline?
Oh, indeed. Yes, it's Monday, November 13th.
And another question is, assuming initial CAS test results are submitted by November 13th, can CAS corrections be completed after November 13th?
That is a good question, and that is something that we can work with you on a case-by-case basis with. So again, let us know, if you have that problem, let us know right away, and we'll evaluate what the circumstances are and decide how to move forward.
That's it for now.
Okay, thanks, Mike. So we're going to switch gears, and we'll talk about how to get through the verification process and get paid quickly and painlessly. And I think everyone knows the less time that you spend going back and forth with a reviewer, the easier it is to meet those deadlines, and the quicker that you can, tell your client that payment's on the way. And from our perspective, we need to make sure that we are spending ratepayer funds effectively. And really, one of the things that goes a long way towards that is consistency. So getting all of your ducks in a row. And what we mean by that, and what reviewers are looking for, is that the models match the specifications, and the specifications match the verification letter, and that matches the invoices, and the invoices and the specifications match the photos. So if we see that model numbers are consistent across pictures and specs and verification letters, things like that, that gives us a lot of confidence that we're looking at the right stuff. And it'll make your reviews go so much easier. And so from here, we'll just kind of touch on a few different things that are kind of common issues or tips that can help smooth this review process. And the first is good photos. So we love to see unit numbers when you enter a unit, so we know which units got visited. And here's an example. If you have windows on your project, take a picture of the NFRC sticker. And this is something that you can coordinate with a contractor if they're going to pull off the sticker right away. But this is really handy, and it keeps you from having to go and looking up ratings from the manufacturer based on the window model number. So take snapshots of the stickers so you know what's installed. And the same with nameplates. Make sure that your picture's in focus and that you can clearly see what you're looking at. And take this, take a zoomed in picture and then zoom out and take a shot of the entire appliance. So these are the sorts of things that we look for, and it makes verification quicker, and we'll have fewer questions for you at the end. Envelope measures, these can be tricky. A lot of times you don't have access or you can't see what happened after the fact. And this is a great, wall insulation is a great example of something where if you can't get out on site, then you should be working to coordinate with the owner or the contractor to take some snapshots of these items so that you can easily verify and know what's installed. So next, cut sheets. So you'll be submitting manufacturer cut sheets for all the equipment that's installed. And here it's really handy if you can, if you see at the bottom here, there's a list of a whole number of model numbers for a given appliance. If you can highlight or flag the appliance that actually got installed there, that makes it easier and faster on our end. It's something you'll be verifying anyway, so it's fairly quick. And likewise, look up the product for its AHRA certificate and include that in your submittal. These things are going to make it really easy for the reviewer to check and sign off on measures. And permits. Permits are one of the things that you submit for verification. They should be signed. And again, if this is something, getting the signatures can take forever. So if you're having problems with this for some reason, let us know. Check in with your plan reviewer. Give us a heads up. And finally, invoices. So you are checking these invoices because they're part of the verification letter. For each item that's installed, you have to put down how much it cost, and we report that to PG&E. So while you're doing that, usually you have a whole slew of other unrelated non-energy measures on your invoice that you're dealing with. Just go through and highlight those measures. This is a really good example from one of our partners of an easy to follow invoice. So it's a straightforward process to simply add those items up and figure out what the actual energy measures are. And this requirement is new this year in a sense. So we are requesting lighting schedules whenever lighting is replaced on a project. This is something that during test-in, you're providing information so that we can verify the baseline conditions. But if you are replacing lighting, we need to know quantities and wattages for the pieces of equipment. And so I'm going to take a pause here. We're doing really good on time, so I think everyone's going to get to go to lunch at a reasonable time. But I wanted to see if there are any questions about verification, what items that you should be submitting as part of your package.
There's a question about the pictures. Is there a way to have the pictures be date and time stamped? Do we have guidelines on how we want how we want the partners to report that data?
We don't have specific guidelines, but a date and timestamp on pictures is really handy. Also, providing the actual JPEG is sufficient for us. So usually, if I'm looking at a picture like this, as a reviewer, I can right-click the file and see when the picture was taken, and that will give me enough information. So I would say in the spirit of making it easy and making it faster, if you can add a timestamp to your photos inside your camera, that's going to be a little bit quicker for us. Barring that, providing us the actual JPEG files as opposed to a PDF of photos it will be sufficient.
And that's
cool.
all for questions right now. Thanks.
All right. We're going to jump straight ahead to a quick overview of combustion safety at test out. And I'm going to be less in the nitty-gritty of what the thresholds are and more talking about what we need to test. So when you go on site for verification and you find that, and there's new equipment that's been replaced, and that equipment is vented, which means it has a flue. 100% of that equipment needs to be tested and checked. If you have a brand new stove, gas stove or gas range that's part of the work scope, those items do not need to be tested. Any units that failed at test-in, so any pieces of equipment that failed during the test-in, those need to be tested at test-out. So you have to retest those items, those pieces of equipment. And if you had a systemic failure at test-in, and we define that as 50% of the tested dwelling units or pieces of equipment, whichever is more stringent in that case. If 50% of dwelling units failed at test-in, that's known as a systemic failure. And regardless of the work scope, 100% of units need to be tested at test-out. And then finally, if your project had envelope upgrades, windows, insulation, etc., then 100% of affected equipment needs to be tested. And what is affected? That is equipment that is within the pressure boundary of the unit. So now, next part is what are the actual tests that I need to perform when I go on site? So here we're going to talk about equipment types. So if you have, excuse me, if you have an atmospheric draft piece of equipment, you can identify if it's atmospheric draft by checking its National Fire Protection Agency rating. So if it's a category or category 1 or category 2 appliance, and it's inside the dwelling unit, then you need to perform all combustion safety tests. So that's worst case spillage, CO measurement in the flue and undiluted flue gases, ambient CO measurement, gas line leakage test, and a visual inspection of the unit. If you're looking at a sealed combustion piece of equipment, so this is a piece of equipment that has a airtight vent connector. It's NFPA category 3 or 4. No matter the location, whether it's inside a dwelling unit or outside on a porch or up on the roof, assuming you can get to it, you should be conducting a visual inspection and gas line leakage testing. And finally, if it's an atmospheric drafting piece of equipment and it's outside the dwelling unit, and by that I mean outside the pressure boundary of the unit, then you would be testing for gas leaks, and you would also check the combustion ventilation air calculations. So the partner handbook, which you should all have, outlines the thresholds for what constitutes a failure, but PG&E's action levels are a bit more strict. And so these are the action levels that would require you to notify the gas service representative, PG&E's GSR. So for vented appliances, if the appliance fails spillage and then has a CO level of 26 parts per million or higher, that's in undiluted flue gases, that's a sign for you to give the GSR a call and let them know. Likewise, if it's a vented appliance and it passes spillage, but the CO threshold is over 100 parts per million air-free, you should call the GSR. And finally, if it's an unvented appliance like a stove, if you measure 26 parts per million or greater as measured CO, then call the GSR. So these don't necessarily constitute a failure, but they constitute a time when you have to notify PG&E, and you should talk to the maintenance person as well. And there are a few visual inspection findings that require you to notify the GSR too. If you have any questions about these, you can reach out to us and we'll help you with them. But if during the course of testing you find any of these items on this list, you should be calling the GSR. Defective heat exchangers, those are definite safety hazards. They can make people sick, they can kill people. That's a huge red flag, and you'd be failing that appliance no matter what if you came across it. Delayed ignition is if the unit is having a hard time firing off of a spark ignition. Flame interference, if the air handler comes on during testing and disrupts the flame, you see the flame react to the air handling unit, that is a time to notify the GSR, and is actually a sign that maybe there's a problem with the heat exchanger. So it definitely, you should be investigating those things further. Likewise, if you're having poor combustion, the flame is yellow and not looking clean, call the GSR. And if you see charring or smoke, evidence of flame rollout, those are other times. And, general venting problems, those are cause for concern and failure. And likewise, short cycling is an issue that you should call the GSR. So my point is here, the visual inspection is important and shouldn't be overlooked when we're doing this testing. It's important for both determining if the unit is operating in a safe condition, and we have, and it's a requirement in our program to notify the GSR if there are problems. So, any combustion safety questions?
I haven't gotten any new questions, Matt.
Okay, excellent. I think I know from what we've seen so far this year, I think our partners are doing a really good job of identifying issues and making sure they're corrected. So, but again, if you have any questions after the fact or you're unsure of something, check in with us and we'll put you in the right direction or guide you in the right path. All right, so 2018. So we expect that we'll have a program next year. So that's the good news. And but what I want to say is, this is where we need your help. I've spent, most of my time today talking about meeting these deadlines. November 13th is our big one, and figuring out, helping you complete your projects and making them go smoothly at test out. And that's really our focus for this meeting and for this year. So we have a lot of exciting announcements to make for 2018, but our ability to have a healthy budget that serves a vast number of projects really depends on our performance this year. And essentially, performance means spending the incentives. So we want to get these projects done. If you're having issues with deadlines or the construction schedule, check in with us, and we will do our best to work with you. But November 13th, that's the time to keep in, or the date to keep in mind. And that was quick. So that's all I have today. Mike, if you had any comments or if we have any other questions, we've got plenty of time to take them.
Okay. Yeah. Anybody that's on the call, if you have any questions, I think that you covered it. So a lot of details coming in the Q4 partner meeting about what's going on for 2018. We know that there are a lot of questions. So if you have any that you'd like to ask, we can answer what we can right now. But those details are still being worked on. So expect more information later on, including when and how we can get started on those projects. But we're focusing really on the 2017, so November 13th, 2017 deadline, and I think that that's the main takeaway from today. I'm not seeing any questions come in, so I'm happy to adjourn early if that's all that we need to discuss today. Any last call for questions? All right, great. Well, we're always available, so please feel free to get in touch with us if you do have questions. Matt, feel free to close us out.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Here's our contact info. Don't hesitate to reach out to us, and thank you for your time.